everybody, welcome to Lex Makela Presents In the Spotlight. We've often heard that everyone has a story to tell. And this series is our attempt to find those very stories in the legal profession. We hope to look beyond firms, job titles, colleges, etc. and find what inspires and motivates our favorite lawyers. So come join us and enjoy this episode of In the Spotlight. Today we have with us Advocate Tariq Khan. Sir is a Principal Associate at Advani & Co., the author of On the Rise, Inspiring Stories of Young Legal Professionals in India, and Business World's youngest 40 under 40 lawyer. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. So it's truly a pleasure to be here at your office. Thank you so much for inviting us.
It's my pleasure. I'm really happy to see you all. Thank you.
So we've hosted a few interviews, but they've mostly been offline due to the pandemic, or we've had to go to the interviewee's house. So I'm really excited to be back at a law firm after.
Yeah, me too. Equally excited because we were functioning virtually and slowly recently we've started fully physical.
Right. So, sir, you've joined Advani & Co. straight out of law school and have been working here for the better part of 7 years.
Almost, yeah.
Right. So, sir, what has been the work environment here at Advani & Co. and what have been some of your more memorable moments here?
So the work environment has been pretty interesting like any other law firm. Right. There's been work, and but it's been very interesting work, and I was never interested in arbitration before joining the firm. In law school, I was not taught arbitration as a subject, and it is only when I started working at Advani & Company is when I realized that there is a subject called arbitration, and it's a better way of resolving disputes between the parties, and preferably in a commercial aspect, in a commercial angle. If you look at, because it's expeditious, it's fast, and it's less time consuming, and of course cost saving. So I think, and it's less technical. So these are a few features why I really enjoyed doing arbitration. And few good moments in Advani would include, of course, when my work was recognized, and at a young age I was made a senior associate. My efforts were appreciated. From time to time I got promotions, and at the age of 28 I became a principal associate, which I think is a good recognition of my work. So these were some nice moments when my work was encouraged. If you look at the recent award that you're talking about, 40 under 40, the firm nominated me. So that in itself is one reason I think why I think the firm is liking my work.
So sir, just before we started recording, you were telling us about your first day at Advani & Co. Yeah. So could you tell us that again?
Okay, so the first day at Advani, so firstly I was finding some difficulty locating the address, and I got late for my interview, and the then partner, Mr. Apar Gupta, so he was interviewing me, and when he asked me, I was very nervous because I was straight out of law school and I had not cleared my bar exam, and I was not even enrolled as a lawyer. Right after my exam, because I had the fear of not having a job because there were no placements in college back then. This was 2014, June 1st. Almost the summer vacation had started or were going on probably. Yes, and that's when he had called me on a Saturday. And I had my exam the other day, but right after the exam, instead of enjoying after college when people are excited and they go party, I came to the office, I had a discussion with Mr. Apar Gupta, and he asked me about arbitration. So before the interview, I had read two important judgments, Balco and Bhatia, because that's all I knew. And I read them fully, and so I was not preparing for the exam, I was preparing for the interview. And I honestly told him that, look, I do not know arbitration at all. I know this is the firm which is doing arbitration, and I desperately need a job because I'm right out of my law school and there are no placements. But all I can do is I can assist you to the best of my ability, because I know as a junior I am here to learn, I'm raw material. And then when he asked me about, okay, what are your expectations and all, so I said, I don't have any expectations. I know I'm a raw material, and whatever the firm feels subject to my performance, I think that would be adequate for me.
So sir, talking about learning, and since you started at a young age, so sir, while researching about you, we came to know that in your previous interviews, You have mentioned Justice Iyer, Dr. Singhvi, and Mr. Jeth Malani as your mentors. So, in what ways have they influenced your career and your career choices? And like, what is the age at which people should start looking for mentors, if I may say?
You're right. So I think there is no age for looking for a mentor. I think that when I was a law student, I had difficulties. I belonged to a very small town in UP, Shah Jahanpur, and I did not have command over the English language. My schooling was in a very average school, and I had various issues. I had stage fright. I couldn't really face the crowd, and I was always, whenever I used to speak in front of the public or in front of anybody, my hands would tremble, my legs would shake, my lips would go dry. I was really nervous. It was a serious thing. And it is only then I realized that, I need to work on this, because that's why law was never my first career choice. And law chose me because I couldn't clear my engineering exams and I had no choice. So when I came to law, I realized that I will have to eventually learn the language, because I realized that High Court and Supreme Court only English is permissible. So English is I feel strongly still that it's just a language. It's a mode of communication. It's not about knowledge. And I don't think people who do not know English are illiterate. They may have all the knowledge in the world, but so it's just a mode of communication. But anyway, be that as it may. So I realized that I'll have to learn. And a lot of people keep asking me day and night that, how did you work on this? So I keep telling them the only secret is to read, read and read. And when you are reading judgments especially, that's where you see pure law. And especially if someone like Justice Iyer, why I call him a mentor, though I have never met him, I'll be honest about it. But I used to see his interviews, I used to read all of his judgments. And I still remember all of his judgments. In fact, I wrote a very interesting article when he passed away, late centenarian Justice Iyer. So he was, I think he was a jurist. He used to coin words in his judgments. So procedural law, he would call processual law. And you see the philosophy, the kind of, I think, legal lexicon that he used to use in his judgment. I think if you read that, you don't need any dictionary or anything. You read his judgments and I think you're good to go. So I used to read his judgment. I used to find it very interesting. And that's when I realized that, by reading judgments, unless you start naturally speaking the law, you read till then, and then your language will eventually improve. Like, for instance, if you ask me, so I can quote his judgments with citations. That's the kind of commitment. And I will say it on record. For instance, if you talk about Som Prakash Rekhi versus Union of India, I think it was 1981 Supreme Court 212, wherein he said something, I may have missed it, but the bottom line was, it was on fundamental rights. So he said that the court cannot connive at a process which eventually will make fundamental rights as rare as roses in December and ice in June. And then I started reading Lord Denning, I started reading James Madison, started quoting them in moot courts. Even today, recently I was judging and I quoted, I don't want to flaunt all of that, I can do. But, all I'm saying is that language comes from there. Naturally, you start talking the law, and you start using it in your responses to the moot court judges, to your colleagues in class, in lectures, and then it looks really nice. The other thing is Mr. Ram Jeth Malani, whom I used to look up to. When I used to see him, I always wanted to click a picture with him. When I used to look at him, and he was always surrounded with so many lawyers. So it was like a dream come true to come just stand next to him. But fortunately, I remember the first year when I was an intern, I saw him and I literally begged my senior to please make me meet him. So Miss Meera Bhatia so she had worked with him long back. She said, okay, I'll make you meet him if you work diligently. And then one fine day she made me meet him, and we have a picture from that day. And then when I wrote the book On the Rise, so I went to his residence, and that's where he insisted for a signed copy. So I was giving an autograph. That video I posted, unfortunately he passed away. But he was a great man. So, learning from him, his courage, he always spoke against anything which was unreasonable and wrong. So, somebody as good as him. And then Dr. Singhvi, of course, you pointed, Mr. Siddharth Luthra, and then Mr. Sandeep Sharma, Mr. JP Singh, all these people, I was a nobody.
Yes, sir.
So, helping somebody, giving them internships, encouraging them, entertaining them, I think that gives you a lot of motivation.
So that is some level of dedication and equally sweet fruits like a signed copy to Mr. Jeth Malani.
You've been very outspoken about the cost of legal education and how very often it's out of reach for many people. And we definitely agree with you on that. So what kind of structural changes can be made to make the legal education somewhat of a more accessible field of study?
So like I said, I have been somebody who has been following, I've been like a disciple to Justice Iyer. So that's what he said, and that's why I believe in it, and I've seen it. So he said education is not imparted anymore, it's sold. Okay, and that's the sad part. The fee structure is really sad. So for somebody like me, so somebody was asking me, why didn't you appear for the top law colleges? I'll be not taking names, but frankly, I did not have the money to afford, and I had to think before even considering to appear for these exams. And somebody said, why are you going for Jamia? I said, because it's a central university and the fees is 5,000 rupees per year. So my law completed in almost 35,000. I finished my law degree. Somebody who's strong on merits should not suffer due to the economic disability and should not be denied education, because imparting education, I think, is something which is a responsibility of the state as well as to all the stakeholders, because we need quality lawyers. Problem is that in our country, if you see, I mean, it's my personal opinion, I feel that judges are given a lot of respect, and which is great. But I think teachers also deserve the same kind of respect. And in the way you see in UK and other countries, the professors are, a lot of people in fact take pride in using prefix professor. Unfortunately, the problem is that the teachers, some of them who are teaching us in many law colleges, they've never stepped in the court. So they may make you good lawyers, but they may not be able to make you good advocates. Because advocacy is a skill at the end of the day, which you acquire over years of practice. And reading law, I mean, you can be a good lawyer, you can know the law, but how to implement it, how to put it, and how to apply it, I think that all you learn in the court of law, which unfortunately, like I said, people who are teaching you Evidence Act may not have even stepped in court all their life. So I think that's one thing which can be worked upon. The other thing which I feel can be worked upon is the restructuring of the syllabus, because when I look at this, I think it's all outdated. Absolutely. I don't know for what reason. You may be aware, but subjects like sports arbitration, maritime, then you talk about Competition Act, arbitration, international arbitration, investment arbitration, they're all not there. Regulatory matters, too many recent concepts are not being taught anywhere, and law is ever changing. I mean, it's not something which remains same for years. The syllabus has not been revised for, I think, decades. And many law colleges are still teaching arbitration as a clinical course subject. The other issue is that we were taught interpretation of statutes in 4th year, and we were taught penal statute and taxing statutes in 2nd year, 3rd year. So I think first you teach us how to interpret, and then you teach us the subject. Then it makes sense. Anyway, I mean, these are some changes which I would suggest.
So you've mentioned online ADR methods and e-arbitration. Do you think that is more of an exclusive practice that is confined to commercial disputes and large-scale commercial disputes and corporate disputes? Or do you see that going towards the larger population, whereas the general public might consider ADR methods rather than just going into litigation?
I think, like what you said, right, currently how it is, the commercial disputes are the ones which are in the ambit of all of these dispute resolution mechanism. But I think if you talk about mediation, if you talk about e-dispute resolution, online dispute resolution, if you talk about internet contracts, I think the ambit of arbitration, mediation and ADR methods should be increased. That's what the Supreme Court did recently when we saw Vidya Drolia, for instance. I think it is a great judgment which has now come, wherein they have said that arbitrability of rent control matters, except the special legislation, will be now arbitrable. So you have to expand the arbitrability. I'm not saying do the arbitrability in criminal matters, but some interesting judgment like Deccan, like Avitel, Iyer Swamy, that fraud, because a lot of time people used to take allegations of fraud, that criminal angle is there in the matter, so this will not be arbitrable, to wriggle out of the ADR.
So you're an active columnist as well. So where does that inspiration come from?
Inspiration came from nowhere, frankly. That just started for the sake. So I started reading judgments because I realized that if I call myself as an arbitration enthusiast, I need to know about the developments of law. I need to know what is happening in arbitration. So as a matter of practice, I started reading each and every judgment which was being pronounced in the country. So I used to know which judges are sitting, for instance, in Delhi High Court in the arbitration roster. I would just go and open Delhi High Court website by judge name. I would put the time period and see what judgments they have given. So I would read quickly, and this way I was able to read judgments quickly, and I got comfortable with judgments in general. And I think you get to know the mindset of the judge also, that what is their approach. So a lot of judges have pro-arbitration approach, and which is rightly so. In Delhi High Court, I think all judgments have that. All judges fortunately have that approach. But in some courts, we have seen some judgments which were not very progressive. So keep yourself abreast with the latest development of the law, and that's what I keep doing. So then I realized that if I'm reading so much, why should I not help the other lawyers? So I started writing that column in Bar and Bench, which is like 50 landmark judgments passed by the Indian courts, and that I would just summarize the relevant point, identifying the obiter ratio, and that helped quite a lot of people. So
A lot of people. It would help us as well.
I'm glad. So that was the whole idea. In fact, even today, people keep asking me, that whenever we are searching for judgments, we see your picture. And my picture, that makes me happy more than anything. If there is some recent, like for instance, recently I was reading about statutory arbitrations. So I realized it's an area which is unexplored. Then, maritime arbitration. So when I read something, confidentiality, for instance, I read, and as an arbitration lawyer, I never used it in the proceedings. This is something you never have to practice, confidentiality. But I wanted to read about it, and I think this I read last month. I read way too much, and then I thought I think others also deserve to know. So then I summed it up in an article and I shared it on SCC.
Yes, sir. And sir, you are always there to help the young students as well. So sir, is this because since you know that law chose you and is law your passion?
Now law is my passion. So I was having this discussion yesterday with somebody, and I was telling them that, so that person asked me about my priorities back then in college. They were very different. And today they are very different. So priorities keep changing from time to time. At that time, I was not very fond of law. When I was not a law student. But when I started, working closely with the subject and I started reading it, it started interesting me. And, my personality, I think, was developed back in family when we used to have arguments in family. I think the lawyer in me with siblings and all. So that's when I think the lawyer inside me grew. The evidence, when my parents used to say something and I used to just defend myself back then, no, where is the evidence? So many times we do that. So I think our personalities develop back like that, and when you look back. But honestly, there was nobody in my family who's a lawyer, so I did not have anybody to look up to. And see, my idea is simple. When you get into any field, there's struggle in every field. I wrote something about this also on LinkedIn. And you cannot just leave the profession because you feel there's a lot of struggle. So all I'm saying is we can do everything if we put in our honest effort, be it passion, profession, personal life. I think everything requires time and that kind of dedication. I mean, I started cooking. Everybody became a cook in the lockdown. Yes. But I was cooking pretty good. I was posting on Instagram also. So all I'm telling you is that if you're putting honest efforts in anything, in any profession, I don't see people getting lucky sitting at home. The harder you work, the luckier you will get. So I think efforts are very important in everything, and you will see results eventually. But one thing we have to keep in mind is that results are not immediate. So you will have to wait for some years, probably months. So always, set goals. Don't look for shortcuts. Wait for long-term goals, like 5 years from now. And don't prepare that I want 2 years later, I want this. Because if that doesn't happen, then you get disappointed. Just keep giving your 200% and results are bound to happen, I'm telling you. And more than you have imagined.
And so law students like us, most of us are in our third year and third year and second year students only. So, and some of us still don't feel that law is our passion. So what should we do? We talked about the mentors as well. So what should we do to find our passion? How did you find your passion and how do you feel about it now that, okay, it is my passion?
Okay, so honestly, like I said, I think I have posted about everything, and that's why this is becoming easier for me. I like to, just keep writing randomly. So you're right, a lot of you, I used to feel this almost every day, that what am I going to do after 5 years? And I think this is going to happen with you even till the last day of your final year. Unless you are actually in some place, this fear is important. I'm not going to say, no, don't worry. But bottom line is that let things take their natural course. And what you can do right now is something interests you. If you see, so my area is that, so people call me an arbitration expert or somebody who knows arbitration, though I'm not. There may be many people who know quite a lot more than me, but frankly, the idea is that tomorrow if I see there's a new field introduced, for instance, mediation, which is ongoing, but I think mediation is the future. I will shift my priorities to mediation. Because at the end of the day, as a lawyer, you have to adapt to the ever-changing law. I can't say, no, I want to follow the 1940 Arbitration Act. If tomorrow virtual hearings are only taking place, I will have to adapt to it. If insolvency came, I wanted to become an insolvency expert. I started writing on insolvency, and I am really, really bad at corporate law. But I started reading Companies Act. I started investing all my energies in that, and now I know a little bit about it. And I've been able to write 5-6 articles on that. So you get to know some interesting concepts only when you invest time in it. It cannot be that you are in third year not reading anything, oh, I'm not interested in law.
You have to be a lifelong learner.
Yes, and to make that kind of statement, you should tell me that I've spent 1,000 hours with the law, with this book, and I have not been able to understand. You don't want to read and then you want to complain, oh, this is not interesting. And I think a lot of responsibility is on the teachers, because some of the teachers can make, subject very interesting, while others can make it really boring. With great respect to teachers, because I have a lot of respect for my teachers, but I think, I think it does matter who's teaching you what. I mean, I'm a teacher myself, so I've been teaching for almost 7 years now, and I know how to teach my students. So rather than the rote method, I like to, go in a very different direction and don't teach them from the book. I like to teach them with experiences, with judgments, with real case. I give them the situation, I start with the illustration, and then I leave it open for the class to discuss. And then they argue the whole matter till the end. And they keep giving arguments, I keep writing on board. So that's how we build a whole case from first to the end.
So sir, like you obviously work a lot and you travel a lot. So like is travel your only medium of de-stressing, or are there other things that you do? Like you write as well, you travel as well.
Writing will not release stress for anybody, because it also requires a lot of reading. But I enjoy. I mean, more than that, I appreciate when people actually acknowledge my efforts. That's actually the best thing. So sometimes I put in, I burn the midnight oil, and I think a lot of people are doing that. I'm not the only one. I'm sure you all are working in your own way. So when I burn the midnight oil and I see that, okay, I don't want to do it, but then I'm like, no, let's do it. So New Year, for instance, I finished 5 articles in a day, because I did not want to carry forward anything in the new year, and I wanted to finish it then and there. So this is the most important thing. If there is pending work, you finish it no matter what. So the next day I was partying all night on the New Year's, because there was nothing. Otherwise, I have not been able to focus on anything. So I never mix business with pleasure. When I'm enjoying, there is zero work. I don't let work interfere me at all. When I'm traveling, and you talked about travel, so yeah, I love travel, and I think everybody has a passion. Travel makes me very happy. If you send me right now anywhere, but I don't like traveling for work, frankly, because I don't think work and leisure can coexist. So when I go to travel, I just want to travel and, explore the place. The world is beautiful, and I don't think there's only work in life. We must have that kind of satisfaction in life, because when I look back, I really want to see that, I've seen the world, I've traveled places, I've learned languages, I've eaten food of different countries, cultures, I've experienced traditions, so many things to learn from different people. If we narrow down our scope and we live only in a particular city or a locality, our thought process, our mindset, our horizons don't get broadened. That's the whole idea about foreign education, when people say you broaden your horizons, because people from all culture give something or the other. They contribute about their legal system also, their life, and you learn such nice things, and perspectives are very different. So maybe you inculcate in your habits, good habits and bad habits both.
So have you been traveling since the lockdown?
I have been traveling quite a lot. I mean, not during the strict lockdown, but when the lockdown was lifted, I've traveled, I think, to 6-7 cities. Every weekend I would just go somewhere and go out with friends, because I think it's all mentally exhausting otherwise. I think we all need time for ourselves, and traveling gives me, so I think passion cannot just be work. We all have different passion also. So when passion is present, you can't break free. So I mean, a lot of people are passionate about work. If you are asking me to sit and work for 14 hours, but something that I enjoy, then for other people it may be like, oh, this guy is struggling, poor guy. He's like, people are exploiting him, but I'm enjoying that work. I'm doing it by, there are so many things which I do, like writing, teaching, judging events, etc. I'm not supposed to do that. I can just finish my office work and then relax. But the idea is that you pursue your passion. If you're passionate about something, you really want to do it till the end. And as long as you have the energy, and when you go back and you will sleep, you feel satisfied at the end of the day, happy.
Sir, you've spoken about how you're an avid reader and an avid writer as well. So what do you think has been your most valuable skill as your lawyer, which you feel has changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, see, honestly, reading is something which I like, but the only problem with me is that I'm not an avid reader. Because a lot of avid readers feel that, they who read books which are not of subject. I only read subject-related books. Sometimes I may read Rumi and all of them, but that's only like once in a blue moon. I have all the books in the world, but I just don't like to spend time on that. I like to read arbitration because I think there's too much to read. And then if I get time, I like to read different subjects. And I think writing has helped me a lot, because I think it gives you that kind of exposure, that kind of visibility, which all of us require today in a competitive world. So I think writing definitely helps. It changes you completely.
Mental clarity, if you're able to express yourself on paper, you can express yourself in front of people.
Absolutely, I fully agree with you. And I think it's very important to write and publish papers and all. Your CV looks good, and at least you can give a written sample to somebody who's planning to work with you or hire you.
So, sir, at the very young age of 26, you wrote the book On the Rise and Inspiring Stories of Young Legal Professionals in India. So, what was that journey like for you, and what inspired you to write that book?
That was a very, very interesting journey, and I think the only thing which I consider as an achievement, because at that time I was literally, even today I'm not somebody, but I was literally a nobody who came from, not from the top tier schools. I'll not be saying NLU, non-NLU. And so I was a first generation lawyer, not from Delhi, no background, and I was a very struggling lawyer with no contacts. Nobody knew me. And I wanted to write something for people like me who were shy and who did not have the courage to speak up and go and approach people for help. I could not do that all my life. I would just apply, and when there was a rejection, all my life, my inbox is still full of those emails. We regret to inform you, in case of any suitable opportunity, we'll get back to you. We have kept your CV in the database. I've learned it. And that's when I realized that I think there's no dearth of legal opportunities. There's dearth of information which is restricting the trickling down of information for these youngsters. So I decided, why not bring this advice to these people? So I decided to take the top minds, young minds who are doing brilliant in all different fields, academician, the judges, the in-house counsels, practicing senior lawyers, the best of the lot. So I took opinion from my colleagues in the fraternity who are the best ones, and I wrote about their journey, how they made it, to inspire people. So that's a book but the problem was, a lot of people did not support. And that's really unfortunate. When people take initiative, people discourage you rather than encouraging you. And I think that's very, very unfortunate. But most of us, we have great ideas, but we stop at the very out. Because what happens is, the moment you have an idea, I'm thinking of doing this. Friends are like, are you crazy? There are already too many things. And then you'll stop. The idea is dead. If you believe in it, believe in yourself, and you're willing to water it till the end, no matter what, you will make it a success. The problem was that with the book, I needed some good people to give reviews and forwards. Right. So nobody helped, but I was very fortunate that Mr. Chidambaram and Dr. Singhvi, they agreed to write for a person who's a nobody, comes from nowhere, they don't know. Then Justice Sikri, Mr. Fali Nariman, then Mr. Arvind Datar, Mr. Faizan Mustafa, and Mr. Rajkumar from Jindal. All of them, they helped me, a nobody. So these things are the ones that inspire that, this thing cemented my faith in the profession, that there are people who are willing to help people like us. And there were people, frankly, who discouraged, who said, no, I will not write for you. Who are you? I don't know you. Things like that. But I didn't get discouraged. I said, no, I have to do it. But then the end result, the book featured in Fortune 500 magazine. So yeah, it was a best-selling book. And I think people still recognize me with that book, yeah.
So even on your LinkedIn, you express yourself fully. There are quotes, there are motivational pictures and everything. So what keeps you going even after all these years, working for 7 years, becoming so successful? And
not successful at all. But anyway, the struggle will always be there. So because success anyway is for you also, it's an advice. Success is only a journey. It's not a destination. The day you start feeling, no, now I'm successful, I've achieved, I've written a book, I have taught, I have people call, I think that's your downfall. I fully agree with the seniors of the bar, the senior most members like Jamshedji Kanga, who taught Mr. Fali Nariman when he was reading at 93, and Mr. Nariman said, why are you reading? You know everything. He said, no, the moment you start thinking you know everything, that's when your downfall starts. You will always be a student, there's too much to learn. So at the age of 90 to 93, if Jamshedji Kanga feels like that, I'm just almost 30, yeah.
Sir, so working at Advani & Co for 7 years and also publishing a book, is there any advice that you would like to give your 4th year self today? So
basically my advice is that if you have something in mind, for instance, if today I was in 4th year and if I wanted to be an arbitration lawyer, or maybe I was not even clear, but most of us are somewhat clear about one thing. So if I am passionate about arbitration, if I've identified my interest, then all my internships, all my moot courts, all my papers, everything should be in that subject direction. And even if you are not clear, then you explore. Then you explore different unless you are sure about it. So these are the things which I think I would suggest.
So there is always a debate of whether during your law school you have these 5 years of trial period. So should you try out every different kind of internship and see what avenue you want to go into, or should you from the very get-go be fixated on a particular career and do all of your internships in that?
Today law students are very, very smart and brilliant, I've seen first year students being confident and connecting to, I think, who's who of arbitration, competition, transaction. So people are very sorted. However, if there is somebody who's confused and who does not know where to go, I think for such people it's a great idea to explore. So for instance, in first year you do a criminal internship. In second semester you do a civil internship. In third semester you do a court internship. Fourth semester you do a clerkship. So at least you get some idea. Okay, 1 month you are in an organization, and if you are giving it your 200%, you'll at least be sure, okay, this is what I don't want to do. So the idea is to sieve out what I don't have to do. So there are subjects which do not interest me at all. In my case, it was tax. I cannot stand tax, and I was very sure I was getting 2-3 times more salary in a firm initial years, which was doing tax practice. I said, I'm sorry.
But sir, we had one question. Like, is there any reason why you did not pursue LLM, since you love law, and like law is your passion now? So is there any special reason why you did not want to pursue LLM? Do you think that it was not required at that moment?
So frankly, I think that for education there's no age. And at that time, so I was personally of this view that unless I'm sure what I want to do, like today I'm sure I want to learn more in arbitrates. But at that time I would have spent like 30-40 lakh rupees. I did not want to do the top tier college of India because of the fees. Why would I want to go to the foreign colleges and then getting a degree from there, which would have perhaps, so at that time I wanted to do criminal law. I wanted to do criminal law. I found it interesting, and perhaps I would have gone for LLM criminal law, and today I would be doing arbitration. So all that money wasted. Right. So unless you are sure what is your passion, and once you know that this is my subject, and that you only know after 1 or 2 years of experience. And then if you go, you get a good college, you get scholarship, and then you make contacts, you know how to make things happen.
So you've spoken about the importance of your teachers in your life, and you've also spoken about the disparity between some conventional law schools and some which have more advanced facilities.
Yeah.
Do you think there was something amiss in your legal education, and is there something more conventional law colleges such as Jamia, CLC, GLC?
See, I'll tell you frankly, you're right. I mean, yes, some of the colleges are providing world-class facilities, that I will not deny. I've seen some libraries which I was surprised. Like back then we used to go to NLU Delhi to research for a moot wherein we were against them in some of the moots. And the library was world-class, I'll not deny. But I think at the end of the day, it's on a person. A lot of interviews I've seen students saying, sir, we don't think the college is supporting us. So now I tell them, what have you done? ILI, for instance, is accessible. You have not gone there. Delhi High Court Library is accessible. You haven't gone there. Have you read all judgments? Have you even opened a book? No, everybody wants to just Control F and Google Indian Qanun. That's it. The problem is students don't read the judgments. You prepare a compendium, but you don't know the whole facts. You're citing 200 judgments in a moot court memorial, but you don't know the facts. What I'm saying is reading, I know everybody is lazy. Inherent nature is that we don't like reading that much. But you have to have that kind of passion, otherwise don't participate. If you participate to win. There are no second winners or second runners up. There's only one winner. So aim for the best, then let's see what happens. But at least have that kind of preparation. You can't just say, oh, my college is, the books that are there in college, have you seen people sitting in library? I haven't. And everything is available online. The internships that you do, material is available there. You request somebody there, get photocopy done, or go to the High Court, get the photocopy done. Who's stopping you? But nobody wants to do it, and we find reasons to, we have to cover up for the loss. So we say, oh, the teammate was not a good speaker. He was, all that, how it is.
So sir, like talking about moot courts, like you have judged moot court competitions. So sir, is there any recurring mistake and like any improvement? Like since you talked about reading the judgments and actually reading something, is there any other tips that like people who are doing a moot should know?
I have judged more than 100 moot courts, and I have judged like the prestigious ones also. Jessup semi-finals I was judging. I've been invited for all the top ones. So I think I'm in a position to comment on that. Sir. So one thing is, it's all about court craft. It's about court manners. You have to behave in a certain way. You may know everything about the moot court, but if you don't know how to behave with the judge may be arrogant, irritating sometimes. You may not like the questions he's asking, but you have to be polite. You have to listen, and you have to respond to questions. The moment you start evading questions and not responding, that's the biggest turn-off. The moment you are using any language which is rude, because you have to talk to him as if he's a sitting judge. Right. And you have to give him that kind of respect. You may not be knowing everything. And always argue on facts, because facts should run through your blood, your veins. even if you are sleeping and if I ask you what is para 32 of your mood problem, you should be able to quote it. Read your mood problems at least 30 times, 30. And I'm not saying exaggerating. 30 means 30 because every time you read it, you'll find something new. The moment you lie, you lose the confidence of the court, and you don't argue on something you don't know. If you don't know anything, accept. If you talk in circles, if you try to answer, then you just a gone case. And most of the students just look at the one judge. They don't look at the other judges. So they should know that, he's also going to mark you equally, because one judge may be very active. So they keep looking at him and keep answering, your lordship. And they don't even look at the other judge. The other judge is just sitting. So idea is that you give importance to both the judges, respond to the questions, be polite, use nice language. For instance, I'll tell you one basic example. So people don't realize that the marks are also of the timing. 90% of us succeed. Unfortunately, out of 10, I give them 4 or 5, no matter how good they are. Some people finish on time. I give them full. So you need to understand that marking criteria, not just knowledge or speaking skills, court manners, the way you are dressed up. Some people have those spikes and very fancy looking clothes. Dress up decent manner and look presentable. Everything matters, frankly. Personality, and be polite and humble. Like for instance, if you are asking for extra time,
yes, sir.
A lot of people say, Lordship, just 1 minute. I just want to. The idea is not to finish everything. He doesn't know your speech. Keep a backup ready. Right. Confidently you say, lastly, I would like to say, he doesn't know what you have left, what you have finished, unless you make it obvious that you have left it. And one last thing, if you're asking for an extension, for instance, the language that you use, it differentiates you from the other lot. Some people just say, can I just get 30 seconds, please, 1 more minute? No. Instead of that, politely say, Your Excellencies, I see that my time has expired, unless I may be of further assistance to this court that concludes the presentation today. That's it. And once he said, no. In fact, it has been a pleasure arguing before this court. So, these kind of, phrases that you use very politely and comfortably, no rushing, I think that's what is required.
So, sir, like you told us that before law you wanted to do engineering, but unfortunately, and now fortunately, that did not work out. So, why did you want to pursue engineering, and is there a story?
No, I was, my parents wanted me to be a science student, because it was a common trait that, if a student get good marks in 10th, then they get this science side, otherwise they get commerce and arts. So I took up science with that mind. I hated maths. Minutiae of maths never interested me at all. Calculus, integration, I don't know if you guys, derivatives, I don't know what all was there. I've never used it in my life. I don't know why we are taught all of that unnecessarily. But anyway, be that as it may. So I was never passionate about that either. I just wanted to do something for the sake of doing it. I was a hopeless person, frankly. Never really had any ambition in life. I was not somebody who was since day one very focused. But I was always a person who was, always wanted to prove a point, would argue. I mean, I had those traits which were bad. I was scolded for that quite a lot. But, that's how I think my passion grew initially. But engineering also was never my passion, frankly.
So, sir, this period of lockdown has been a time for reflection over your past, thinking about your future, and trying to stay in the present. So, sir, and people took up a lot of activities. Like you told us, you became a cook. So, sir, is there anything else that you learned about yourself during this lockdown period?
I think lockdown for all of us was, I think it was much needed. It was a blessing in disguise in my case. Can't say, I know it was horrific, but a lot of people lost jobs, and there are still not many opportunities for youngsters. And I think youngsters must not get discouraged. I keep telling them and motivating them, because they had lost all hopes. But we were all in this way together, and I think I'm fortunate that things are getting better, and I'm sure there is a lot for all of us coming up. And I think for all of us personally also, we realize that, family is important. Our friends are very important, because at the end of the day, you were sitting alone in a room and I did not become a cook. I had no option. So, I had to cook for myself because it was a lockdown and I stay alone. So I had to manage everything. But then I thought that this is perhaps the time that I will be doing things that I've never done before. And I think if this was the most productive time of my life. I wrote more than 30 articles. I did more than 100 webinars. I taught. I did everything. I don't know what not. So I never got time for other things. We were sitting in office day and night. We didn't have time for people. At least I was speaking to. I reconnected with old friends, people I had perhaps lost somewhere in the journey. And all of us, after college, people you are friends with right now may not be there that time. But yeah, lockdown, I think has taught us that, work is not the only thing. We should value relationships, past, present, future. But do not live in the past. That's my advice, because people start regretting, and then regret is unprofessional. So do not regret. Do not look into the past. People you have left behind, let them go. And there are people in our lives who act like anchors, and we don't realize it. And we are not worried. We are worried because of them. Because of their problems, we have those problems. So cut them loose and let them go. No matter how bad it feels, but it's a part of life.
So, sir, since you are an avid reader as well, throughout this lockdown and maybe before it as well, there may be some books, maybe some podcasts or a YouTube video that may have inspired you, motivated you, and have like helped you go through this journey of maybe this profession. A video that has always been there in your mind, which you always go back to if you ever feel demotivated. So, like, would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, why not? So, any inspirational video I used to see, and still I see today. So when I'll give you something very basic. So when I get up now, I like to exercise a little bit, and I tell Alexa to play. There's this very interesting audio. It's called Set Your Life Up to Win. Morning Motivation is the name. You listen to it, and then you will see the difference in your day. You start your day with a lot of positivity, and it's full of positivity. But apart from that, in the law school, I used to see videos and Lok Sabha debates of Mr. Arun Jaitley, Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, all speeches and interviews of Mr. Ram Jethmalani, Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Gandhi ji, and even all those people who have given speeches. Adolf Hitler, his speeches were mostly in German, but the way he used to speak with a lot of passion, all of that used to give me a lot of, I used to feel very motivated. So if you see any interview of Mr. Ram Jethmalani with any of the news channels, just look at the way he conducts himself, the way he answers, the way he responds. It was all learning for me. Then I saw one very interesting debate between Dr. Singhvi and Mr. Jaitley. This was regarding the Lokpal. And when you see these people, you see what these people were. They were full of content, the way they used to speak, whatever you can inculcate from them, the best of all. Mr. Soli Sorabji, Mr. Harish Salve, Mr. Fali Nariman, all of them, Justice Rohinton Nariman. You see any interview of these people. I used to have a collection. I still have that collection. All the videos downloaded, and I see it whenever I want to learn something, and I use that. I write the expressions that they use. I keep writing and use it in my daily, and I have this habit.
So I think this entire interview has been quite inspirational for the both of us, and I'm sure it will be for our audience as well. Right from your journey from law school and even before that to now becoming, just a well-renowned lawyer and just being an encyclopedia of legal facts and legal knowledge. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. And we're truly honored that we could be here, and thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. This was actually wonderful. I really enjoyed this candid discussion, and many congratulations to the whole team. You guys are doing an excellent work, and the kind of dedication, the whole team members, and I wish you all the best, and I hope we work together in future on something else also. This should not be the end.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you.